All right, and welcome back to another episode on the LoudMouth MMA Podcast Network. This is MMA Yesterday, triumphant return. We are under a state of quarantine. We try not to give away too many, current events on these things, but I feel like it should be talked about. We're under a bit of a quarantine. We had taken a break from MMA Yesterday in order to grow the network. So if you're new to the network because of that growth, we appreciate having you. Definitely, hopefully we're going to start doing this, certainly for the next couple of weeks while we're all quarantined. And then, we'll see what happens after that. The plan is to keep going. That is definitely the plan. But, again, while under quarantine, if there's ever a time to do – this is MMA Yesterday's time to shine, baby. This is it. We got no other sports on TV. Let's go back. Let's watch old UFC events. If you are new to this show, you can find UFC 1 through 39 on the network. You just subscribe wherever you listen to a podcast, subscribe to this one, and you'll be able to get the entire catalog of MMA Yesterday just by simply searching UFC 22, for instance. It should be able to pull this up. So, without further ado, again, this is MMA Yesterday on the LoudMouth MMA Podcast Network. I'm Kyle Steele, and joining me is Mr. Keith Schillen. Hello, Keith.
What's going on, man? So in case someone is watching this like 30 years from now and there's another pandemic, this is the coronavirus pandemic that Kyle is talking about. It sucks that people are sick and people are dying, but it's great that we have time to watch UFC 40 because of this. And seeing the first leg, the first showdown, or whatever you want to call it, of one of the best rivals, or I don't know if it's the best rivals, but one of the most infamous rivalries in MMA history.
One of the most interesting.
Interesting, sure.
We'll go with interesting. So the event is UFC 40. If you remember from these old events, they always have some type of tagline attached to it. So this one is called Vendetta. How do you feel about that, Keith?
Absolutely love it. Love it. It's the one that if you say, oh, I remember when the UFC did, tag names. Do you remember any of them? This was the first one I would think of. The UFC 40 Vendetta. This is, just to give some background. This was the first show in that era that I felt like this was the big one. Like I felt like I was excited. This is the one. If I counted the events, my top 5 most anticipated events ever, this one is making the list. I would still probably put Khabib Conor number 1, but anywhere between 2 and 5, this one is up there. I was so jacked up for this fight.
I like that, and this is what I've always appreciated about you, because I feel like hardcore fans of the sport, and I'm talking hardcore. I'm not even talking about myself. I'm talking about truly, truly hardcore fans of the sport, guys who've been watching this since back in the day, and they're just as big of fans now as they were then. Those types of fans, which you fit pretty firmly into that category. I love that you are able to admit that a fight like Conor Khabib really had that type of pull and that type of intrigue, where I feel like the cool thing to do is to hate on that, especially with the hardcore guys. They want to just hate on all the new stuff, especially as it relates to Conor. And I appreciate that you're willing to tell the truth is all that it is. You're just willing to say the truth that, hey, that was one of, if not the biggest fight in UFC history, and it should be treated as such.
Yeah, UFC, what was that? UFC 229, Khabib versus Conor. I watched every video they would put out. I was so excited for that matchup. Even though I was very confident in my pick. I picked Khabib to win. He did win. It was kind of how I expected it. I expected it to be one-sided, but I was so excited for that. And this fight was another fight that I expected to be one-sided. I expected Tito Ortiz to give Ken Shamrock a beating. I knew the background of Ken Shamrock. I saw that this wasn't his first fight back from WWF, that he was fighting in Pride, that he did lose, almost had this matchup with Vegeta where he complained about a heart. He had this back and forth, unbelievable fight against Don Fry. One of the fights that that should be talked about is one of the best fights ever, especially that era. It's one that kind of gets overshadowed. It's unbelievable back and forth, but he still lost to Don Fry. But I liked it. It was the biggest thing about why I was so excited about this fight. There was two reasons. The first reason is how much attention it got. This is the first fight that got legit, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Mainstream. This is the first one they got mainstream attention. ESPN covered it.
I'll say real quick, by this fight, just in case we've lost people a little bit, we're talking about the main event of UFC 40, Tito Ortiz versus Ken Shamrock.
Yeah. There's been enough talk about Conor McGregor and Habib. I don't know how we turned UFC 40 MMA Yesterday back to Conor McGregor.
But by God, we did it.
He did it. We got the Conor check mark.
There's somebody in a lab right now going, by God, they did it.
So this fight got first. Now we got to scale this back. Now if you're going back to Conor, the attention he gets, the attention that John Jones gets, and even just your basic UFC card, a main event that we would say was weak. The attention that Amanda Nunes versus Raquel Pennington, a fight that not many people were excited about. Still, the attention that they would get is still way bigger than this event got. But for at that time to have ESPN to even talk about this, to have Best Damn Sports Show having both guys going back and forth in an interview, like doing those things, having the press conference where Ken Shamrock says, I'm going to beat you into the living death, and Tito laughing and the back and forth. So that's the biggest reason. That's the number one reason why I was so excited, because the rest of the world seemed excited to me.
Yeah.
And by the rest of the world, they got like 150,000 pay-per-view buys, which would be terrible by today's standards. But for their standards, it was 3 times higher than the biggest pay-per-view buys in the company's history at that time. It sold out the MGM Grand, which was unheard of. They had trouble filling out Duluth, Alabama, and now they're filling out MGM Grand.
Yeah.
So that's one. But the other reason is, man, and I know a lot of MMA fans don't like to say it, a lot of media members don't like to say this. Guys like Marcel, and I love Marcel. I respect Marcel. But a guy like Marcel says he doesn't need the trash talk. I love the trash talk.
100%.
I love it was like one of the first true rivalries, and there was years of building up. I mean, the fight was like 2 or 3 years after the Tito Ortiz, Jerry Bolander flipping off the corner, the Tito Ortiz, Guy Mezger is my bitch, and Kent jumping on the cage, and then back and forth. Like, I love this. That's why I love the name Vendetta. And this is perfect.
Listen, and around here, if you've been an avid listener of MMA Yesterday, the one guy that is our avid fan, he knows how much we love Tito around here. So
we love Tito.
We love Tito.
This whole like MMA Yesterday show, not this particular episode.
It's just an ode to Tito. That's all that it is.
Be called the MMA Tito.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's just an ode to Tito. We will. It has, baby. It has.
Tito headline, because remember, Tito got injured. There was some. So first of all, Tito got injured. He talks about that on the broadcast of this. He talks about the knee injury. He also talks at the end of the fight. He talks about wanting more money. There was a contract dispute. It becomes way worse after this. But Tito's holding out for more money. But there's 2 other things I want to talk about before we get into like the fun stuff. And this is like, to me, was like the first rivalry. You could say Ken and Hoyce, but they were respectful towards each other.
It was a little different.
But the Team Punishment Lions Den rivalry was the first rivalry, and it was no longer Tito picking off the lower name guys, the lesser known guys, I like Guy Mezger, and he was a great fighter, but Guy Mezger and Joe. This was the leader. This is the face of. This is Ken Shamrock, and this is the young versus the old. So that's that too. So first rivalry, but also everyone always credits Tough for saving the UFC, and Dana White has talked about this. The Fertittas have talked about this. That like if Tough failed, they would have had to sell UFC. Who knows where we would be today? But what they don't mention, and I can't remember which one said this, in the past is that UFC 40 got them too tough. Like they were about to be bankrupt, and UFC 40 success gave them enough to get to tough. So that's why this
very important card. And this is one
special to me.
And this is one that you should go watch. As we talk about the card, we'll further explain why you should go watch it. But even if, for what you just said, the importance of this card, it is definitely worth going back and watching. One more thing on the main event before we get to the card, and we always do the kind of extracurricular stuff first. We'll talk about Joe Rogan. We'll talk about the Tank Abbott thing. We'll talk about BJ Penn doing his commentating, and then we'll really get into the card. But here's one thing I want to talk about, and I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about this, but I'm going to do it anyway, and we'll just see where it goes. So Ken Shamrock made his UFC debut. He had been in MMA prior, of course, but he makes his UFC debut in 1993 on UFC 1. And this is where we talk about the Royce-Ken kind of original rivalry. But as you addressed, it wasn't so much a rivalry as it was they were the best. You had the two best, and they wanted to cement that. Didn't they also have like one of the most boring fights in history? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, UFC 9, Dan Severn fight, the second fight against Dan Severn.
It was just horrendous.
It might be the most boring fight in history.
So, and we both had to sit through, what was it, Gabriel Gonzaga and
Kevin.
Who was it?
Gabriel Gonzaga. Gabriel Gonzaga.
It was later. This was a couple years ago. This was like
Gabriel Gonzaga had
ago.
that terrible fight against Kevin Jordan. Are you talking about Derek Lewis, Francis Ngannou?
No. I'm talking about. I'll have to look it up. I'll look it up later, and I'll tell you.
Gabriel Gonzaga had one of the most terrible fights in history against Kevin Jordan, but then he lands a flying Superman punch at the very end that kind of saves the fight.
Yeah, it wasn't that one.
But Dan Severn versus Ken Shamrock 2 makes Israel Adesanya, Yoel Romero look like Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Whaley.
Yeah, seriously, that's no joke.
It is that bad.
So this is what I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about or not, and you'll have to let me know if I'm being too mean.
This might get cut.
It might get cut. We might have to cut this out.
Hear this?
Yeah, we might have to cut this out. I don't know.
All right.
So he makes his debut in '93. It's 2002. All right. So it is 9 years later. Ken Shamrock looks 67 years old when he walks into the octagon. He aged like a banana. He looks so old.
Face, not body.
His body's fine. His face, I don't know if he just spent too much time in the tanning bed. I don't know. But it's only been 9 years. It's 93 to 2002. It has been 9 years. And he looks so significantly older as someone who has not watched this event. It was startling. I was like, "Wait, that's not Ken Shamrock. What are you talking about?" And I'm like, and then I pulled up UFC 1 real quick just to look, and I'm like, how is that the same person 9 years apart? It's crazy. He looks so different.
He obviously had some losses in MMA. He lost to
just ages.
He lost to Fry. Obviously he lost to Royce. I guess he lost to Dan Severn at UFC 9. But he also went to the WWF. That obviously will put some miles on you traveling around.
Fighting every single week.
One thing I want to say something about this. Because in retrospect, it seems like Tito was the name on this card. Tito wasn't the name on this card. They wanted to make Tito the name off of Ken. Ken Shamrock was the one that people knew. Ken Shamrock was the one that went. Ken Shamrock introduced MMA to the world when he went to WWF.
Yeah.
Most people didn't know what this cage fighting thing was. And Vince McMahon saw something on UFC and saw this Ken Shamrock and said, "Oh, this would be kind of cool. We could use a street fighting thing." And
and we haven't seen him.
He was the guy that a couple years earlier was headlining Monday Night Raw against Stone Cold Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon and whatever. And guys, I'm not a wrestling guy, so if I don't have the time, frame, please don't at me with dude. He never was in the same organization when Stone Cold was. I don't know, guys. I'm not a wrestling guy, but you get the point.
So we haven't seen him since Ultimate 96. I will say that. Again, we'll get to that fight and we'll talk about it more in depth. Let's get into the extracurricular stuff. First off, Joe Rogan. This might have been the second in a row, or he might have taken 39 off. and then went to 38. I don't remember. Went 38, 39. I don't remember exactly. But this is one of the – I believe this begins the Rogan era in totality, where prior to this it had been kind of patchy, and I believe this is – you got Rogan basically from here on out. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's true.
I'm pretty sure. So
yeah, that's true.
I
was looking something. I was trying to look up how old Ken Shamrock was
when he walked in. It's like you even look and like his linear time is different. Like it's been 9 years, but his actual age was somehow 19 years. And you're like, well, how does that even work?
So this went down November 22nd, 2002. Ken Shamrock was born February 11th, 64. So he would have been 38 when this fight went down. So I mean, he was old.
That's crazy. I guess 9 years makes a big difference at that point, I guess. But that's still crazy. But Joe Rogan, we're kind of now officially in the Joe Rogan era, again, in totality. And there's a lot of shades of Rogan here where you're seeing it, the getting overly excited about minor things that are happening. Somebody throws up a triangle choke and he's screaming at the top of his lungs.
Oh my gosh!
Even though nothing's actually happening, and that's how Rogan is now. So it's like it's cool to see how consistent I think Rogan's been throughout his commentating career. He's always been this way. I think he's more frantic here. It seems like now he overreacts to stuff, but he's just a much slower, much more polished talker, where here he's just kind of frantic, and he's probably competing with the booth a little bit too, to make sure that his voice is heard, and he wants to be here and he wants to show that he knows what he's talking about and knows what he's doing, and it's pretty cool. It's very, very cool to see. I'm a huge Rogan stan. I think I always will be. Anybody that bitches about Rogan, just shut up. Rogan is the greatest thing to happen to this sport outside of Tito.
No, it's not. It is not the greatest.
Uh-oh.
There's two things that are greater than Joe Rogan that actually debuted on this card. First of all, it was the Roman Gladiator's introduction. Did you get that?
I didn't.
I still miss the Roman Gladiator. That's the first time we saw it. I think the Roman Gladiator was around till, something crazy from like UFC 40 to UFC 180 or something. I don't know when it changed, but it was a very long time. And also UFC used Face the Pain in studio, like in the arena, in their walkouts, but I think it was the first time they used Face the Pain.
Oh, wow.
In their intro. I think. I could be wrong. I tried looking up what I
stand corrected. I stand corrected. That is the greatest thing.
What I read is UFC 40. So between the Gladiator and Face the Pain together. Also, some other things before we get to the actual fights, and we're doing a lot of intro than we normally do.
Yeah.
But this is a special one. That's why.
It is.
This card was loaded from talent sense. There was 6 fighters who at one time held a UFC title on this card. There was 4 other guys who challenged for a UFC title. There was one super fight champion, which is Ken Shamrock. One guy who retired undefeated, and then 2 other guys who went on to be successful coaches and managers.
Who retired undefeated?
Oh, we'll get to that.
Okay, we'll get to that when we get there. That's a good point. That's a very valid point.
Was that what they call that, a tease?
That's kind of that's literally the point of the show. So let me give you the pertinent information here. UFC 40 Vendetta took place November 22nd, 2002. In-house attendance was 13,265. This took place at the MGM Grand Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. Total gate was 1.5 million. Had a buy rate of 100,000. And usually those numbers are rounded. Let me give you a quote here from Big John McCarthy talking about UFC 40 and kind of what Keith was getting to and its importance for Zuffa and UFC moving forward. When that show, UFC 40, happened, I honestly felt like it was going to make it. Throughout the years, things were happening and everything always looked bleak. It always looked like this is it. This is going to be the last time. This is going to be the last year. But when I was standing in the octagon at UFC 40, I remember standing before Ortiz and Shamrock, looking around. The energy of that fight, it was phenomenal, and it was the first time I honestly said, it's going to make it. I like that quote. That's a good Big John quote.
And if they didn't realize it was going to make it, they had Vin Diesel in attendance, and he was high as a kite.
Oh yeah,
and they interviewed him. And I love that Joe Rogan, who is also a guy who likes to be high as a kite at the time, did not recognize that Vin Diesel was very high and I shouldn't interview him.
Oh my gosh. All right, let's get to. Oh wait, one more thing before we get to the actual card was Tank Abbott. So there's two things UFC should bring back. Number one, they should bring back naming the cards. UFC 250, whatever. Give me a name.
Imagine what they'd kind of run out.
They could do 3 words instead of 1. You know, like we have room here.
Or they could just add numbers at the end of it, like UFC 240 Vendetta number 4.
Yeah, right. Vendetta 2, the Electric Boogaloo. Absolutely, that's exactly what they should do. The other thing the UFC should bring back is so they bring and now I watched this on DVD. I don't know if I told you that, but I watched this on DVD. So I watched this stuff in a weird order, I think. So I did not watch any of the prelims. So if any prelims we'll have to discuss. I did not watch prelims. And the Tank Abbott thing was actually separate on the DVD. They did not show when it took place. So
I can tell you when.
I think it was before, because of context clues, I think it was before the welterweight fight. It was before Chuck Liddell.
Nope, it happened, between Matt Hughes, Gil Castillo, so on the broadcast, so in the arena, it was between Hughes' fight and Chuck Liddell's fight.
Yeah.
But on the pay-per-view broadcast, they throw an early prelim, so it was actually between Matt Hughes and when they showed Arlovsky's fight.
Okay, so so for me it was its own separate thing that was on the DVD menu. So I thought that was kind of cool. I was like, what is this? So they need to bring this back. I don't know if I've ever seen them do this in the current era. Yeah, like bring out a big name guy who either had stepped away or bring out a Connor type or whatever it is and announce a fight in the octagon or announce a re-signing in the octagon. Like, do these kind of things. Yeah. This was cool.
The only – and I 100% agree. I actually remember this, and I remember being excited. I was such a fanboy back then. I was excited for Tank Abbott. I was ignoring that he lost like 4 of his last 6 fights, but I used to love it. I remember when Tank Abbott had thrown the guy in the cage. The first ever MMA fight I've ever seen was Tank Abbott. Tank Abbott was the winner of the first fight I ever saw, UFC 6. It was the opening fight with Tank Abbott. So the only issue is they did not have the MMA media like they do now. Like Sherdog was around. I think MMA Weekly might have been around.
Yeah.
Maybe 1 or 2 other sites. But it was not like it is today. And to try to keep these – like, for example, what would be a big name if the UFC signed that right now? Like, say Ronda Rousey returns.
Yeah.
There's no way that's going to become a secret. I mean, look at what they tried doing with Brock Lesnar. They tried doing Brock Lesnar, and an hour before Ariel Helwani gets it out there. There's people in these organizations that would leak it, managers, teammates, somebody would leak something. There's no way. That said, do it anyways. Like, why not? Like, there might be somebody in the arena who didn't know and get excited.
There's a thing in comedy, too, when you're naming a sketch. You name the sketch the punchline because that's half of what makes it funny. Like, don't hide the humor from the audience. Name the sketch whatever the punchline is. And again, with talking about suspense and story writing, like don't be so suspenseful that the people reading it are lost. Give them information, and then later in the story, show them the information you gave them earlier, right? Like, don't lose people. So in kind of your example, you can't keep Ronda Rousey under wraps. But that doesn't mean when you then announce what everybody knows you're going to announce, you can't make it a spectacle.
Yeah.
It can still be a spectacle regardless if people know or not.
Yeah.
So I think
Bellator did it. Bellator did it with Julia Budd and Chris Cyborg. We all knew Chris Cyborg signed. We all knew the fight was done. And they still announced
because it doesn't matter, right? It's just because you know doesn't it really doesn't even take away from the spectacle. It almost adds to it because we know it's coming. So there's a bit of a suspense on what it's going to look like when it happens. So and I think the UFC really gets caught up in that. Like, if we can't keep it a secret, then screw it. We just won't mess with it. Man, do it anyway. Do it anyway. Like, I love it. I think it looks really good.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to the actual card, shall we? First fight, and I have never learned how to pronounce his name, and I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think anybody on the broadcast said his name. I've never heard it, other than Bruce, and I didn't write down phonetically what he said, so hopefully you know, but Robbie Lawler versus Tiki.
Tiki Goshen.
Goshen. I guess it's easy. It's Goshen. That is pretty easy. But I just looked at him I don't know how to pronounce this name.
Tiki, who is most known for being a manager and coach now.
And he also, I think I saw some highlight reels of him, and he seemed to kind of always be on the opposite side of the highlight reels from what I was looking at. This
was the one thing that stood out to this is he was part of Team Punishment, and Robbie Lawler was part of Militant Fighting System, and they were probably the two best teams at the time. So that was the kind of cool contrast. The two best teams going together. So go ahead, take it away.
Listen, Q-Kin Shamrock just getting a little upset right now. So Robbie Lawler versus Tiki. The fight doesn't last very long. There really isn't that much back and forth.
Yeah.
Robbie Lawler is just typical of when we think of a Robbie Lawler fight, this is what it looks like. He is marching forward. He's not checking kicks. He doesn't give two shakes of a rat. You know what?
Yeah.
He is just perfect. Marching him down, swinging for the fences, and then just lands a shot. The shot he lands is one thing. The follow-up shot, I thought he killed him. I was like, my Lord, that was a shot.
So there's one thing that really important about this fight. And this fight has it. I forgot about this. And then I was like, oh, my God, I forgot how many times we used to make fun of Tiki for this. But so Tiki was doing well. He was landing, he was piecing up the kicks. He kind of backing Robbie up with shots and then just ran into right hand. And as you said, is he went down and then Robbie Lawler just destroys him. But the best part, the thing that everyone, the hardcores who was a fan back in 2002 that was on the Sherdog forums and on the underground and whatever was you talking about, is did you catch the comment afterwards?
That he thought that it got stopped because of a cut?
He said,
"Yeah."
He's like, they asked, do you still think Robbie Lawler is overrated? And he goes, "Oh, well, yeah. Well, I mean, I got cut. They stopped it for a cut." It's like, dude, you were unconscious. What? You weren't just unconscious, but this is a term we used to use in MMA Yesterday back when I was recording with the former Matt Hitchcock. He coined this, so I want to give him credit, but. He wasn't just unconscious. He was knocked into the shadow realm. This is an example where someone has been knocked into the shadow realm, which is why he said, the fight's not because of a cut. He doesn't even remember getting punched. Did maybe in your dream you were having when you were unconscious, you got into another fight and you got stopped with a cut?
Yeah, exactly.
In the shadow realm.
Yeah, exactly.
But not in this fight, you were unconscious.
So absolutely brutal knockout. You've seen this on highlight reels of Robbie Lawler. This is a brutal knockout. And then the fun stuff at the end where he thinks it was. He actually goes back to the corner and he says, "What happened? Did they stop it because of the cut?" And they're like, "No, you were unconscious or you were knocked out or whatever." And he's like, "Yeah, but the cut's just too bad. I can't keep going." He's genuinely just, I don't. It's like, what was the fight that just happened?
I actually feel bad about making jokes about it because he's a great
manager
and coach. And he's I never would have thought Tiki would be having this kind of impact later on in MMA than if you took me back to then, I would have thought he would have been a punchline joke.
Well, listen, with nobody that has that goatee should have been able to make it outside of this. You should have been stopped at this point, with that kind of a goatee. So for him to be able to exactly that goatee in Tiki, that is a goatee of a man named Tiki, by the way. But it just happened recently. It was Kevin Lee, and why is his name escaping me?
He was Charles Oliveira.
And everyone gave Kevin Lee shit, and it's like, dude, Kevin Lee didn't know what happened.
Yeah. You know who didn't give a shit was Charles Oliveira.
Yeah, because he gets it. Yeah, he was
conscious. He woke up. He kept wrestling.
Yeah, like he didn't know, and then when he stopped, and Kevin Lee's like, "Why'd you stop it?" He doesn't know. He wasn't being a jerk. He wasn't being a sore loser. He genuinely didn't know. So that's what happened here. Tiki isn't dumb. Yeah. He isn't. He just didn't know. He got completely knocked unconscious and didn't know what happened.
Yeah, this is still one of those. These are one of these all-time great post-fight lines that just it's gotten forgotten over time, and it's a shame that it's gotten forgotten.
Yeah,
you know, it's kind of has that feel of Alistair Overeem when he's like, "Yes,
Stipe tapped." Yeah,
Stipe tapped.
One of my absolute favorite Twitter handles is Stipe tapped, and for the longest time, he was just literally every single day posting about how Stipe tapped, and that was it. And it's awesome, a good Twitter handle.
Someone go on Twitter and start a like. Tiki was just cut.
Yeah, Tiki. It was just a cut. Yeah, with Tiki.
Just a cut with Tiki.
Yeah, just a cut with Tiki. Can we get to him to do a show on the network? It's just called Just a Cut. Just a Cut with Tiki. I think he might do it.
For Tiki.
All right. Next up on our main card here, we had Carlos Newton taking on Pete Spratt. Another fight that does not go very long. Another fight that really didn't have. It was pretty clear where this was going, and then Carlos Newton puts on. Listen, kudos to Pete Spratt. I mean, obviously he frantically tapped, but kudos to him for even. I quit. If my arm got torqued into that position, I would never fight again. I'd be like, I'm done now. That's it. Like, screw that. Why am I doing this to myself? Like that is. So painful. His arm was at a 90-degree angle. Yeah. I mean, it was a brutal Kimura that Carlos Newton laid on him. And kudos to Pete Spratt, man. Because he kept fighting after this, which to me is mind-boggling. I'd be so done. It's just like Michael Bisping, talk about an after a knockdown, obviously Dan Henderson on Michael Bisping. If that happened to me, I'm done. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's it. I'm never. Why? Why would I ever do this again?
Yeah. So just so everyone knows, so basically the fight starts. Pete Spratt throws the kick. Carlos Newton, former champion Carlos Newton, he's coming off that loss, the rematch loss to Matt Hughes. The first loss to Matt Hughes was the controversial one with the slam and the choke.
Second one was
this is the second one. Matt Hughes beats him soundly. There's no controversy to that second one, and now he's trying to rebound. Gets Pete Spratt, catches a kick, takes him down, and then just. Controls him for a couple seconds and gets his Kimura. And so that's some really good showing from Carlos Newton. That was the whole fight. It was takedown, Kimura. Not a good showing from Pete Spratt. But if you want to see a good showing from Pete Spratt, and every time I hear Pete Spratt, I always think this. Pete Spratt was a contestant on – I don't know if you call him contestant, but he was a –
Tough Four.
He was on Blind Date.
Oh, I thought you were going to go Tough Four. All right.
And hold on. Not only was he on Blind Date, I'm pretty sure the dude got laid. Like it ends with him like going in the hotel room with a girl and like closing the door.
That's what's up.
The secret weapon. When I got laid, there was a couple other guys. I remember Tim Sylvia, who was I think he was the heavyweight champion at the time, and like was terrible. And I think Josh Thompson was on it. But I was just looking this up, and apparently somebody had the good idea, and luckily, but it didn't happen. But somebody in the UFC wanted Nick Diaz to be on.
Oh, my gosh.
And I guess Nick Diaz had a girlfriend, so that got shut down.
That would have been a good one.
Could you imagine? Now, this is in the early days where they were trying to, like, the UFC's trying to get out in the public, doing stuff like, let's get our fighters on Blind Date. Good Lord. Anyways, sidetrack. But the thing that happened between the next two fights is they announced BJ Penn versus Cal Uno rematch for the vacant flyweight title. What happened is Jens Pulver, we talked about in a previous episode, Pulver vacated his title. So they have BJ Penn versus Cal Uno fighting for the title we'll talk about this in the next episode. This is a forgotten title fight that pretty much nobody talks about.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's get to that. Well, we'll get to that when the time comes. And he also then commentates the Matt Hughes-Gil Castillo fight as well.
And you can see why they don't use BJ Penn as a commentator anymore.
Yes. And I will say, I do like this concept. We don't see it very often in the UFC. I think it's happened a handful of times. Maybe not even that many.
Commentators?
For one fight. I like that. Bellator does it.
The fighters we have now are like the guys who comment. They're the commentators.
Yeah. I'm talking one fight. Bring in
Elder,
bring in the champion of the division. Bring in Henry Cejudo to commentate, Marlon Moraes' next fight or something along those lines, or not Marlon Moraes, but you know what I mean? Like, bring him in to, Peter Yan or something. Like, bring him in to commentate that fight or something. I like that concept. I think it's something that's very underused, certainly by the UFC.
Yeah.
Bellator will do it, but it's very underutilized by the UFC.
Just don't go over the top. We thought Joe Rogan was overselling things. Don't go BJ Penn. Like, BJ Penn was like, I can't believe I'm here to watch Matt Hughes versus Gil Castillo. Like, this is like some fight that people want to wait. Most people didn't know who Gil Castillo was.
I mean, obviously people were excited about Matt Hughes, and this is also another example where you have a title fight in the early UFC reign, where you have a title fight and then one or two fights after it, which is always very strange. Where now, obviously, the UFC it's happened a few times, but it's very far and few between. Even if it's a division that nobody really cares about, it's typically going to headline the card regardless.
Yeah. And Gil Castillo is a good trigger who has two. Gil Castillo has not just one, but two UFC title shots. Most people have never heard of him, but he has two title shots in the UFC. Gil Castillo.
It's amazing. This is a fight that, again, there's not been much to talk about. We spent so much time at the beginning of the episode. The fights are good. Don't get me wrong. The fights are great. There's just not much to talk about. This is a similar situation.
Yeah.
There's more to talk about here than the first two, but not by much in that we knew where it was going.
Yeah. So let's get a little background. Gil Castillo had a good record headed to this fight. He was 9-1, but he was kind of old. I think he was 54 now. He was born in 1965. This is 2002. So what's it? 37. He was 37 already. When he fights, he went down to welterweight. What happens? He was a welterweight, moved up to middleweight to fight Dave Menne for the inaugural middleweight championship. Then went back down to welterweight. Got this fight. This guy was, he's a good wrestler and everything. But to give the play-by-play on this, it starts off with both of them having really ugly stand-up for about 10 seconds. Matt Hughes moves into double underhook, steps into the entry, into the pocket. It was very easily, without much resistance. Gets double underhook, slams Gil Castillo down, starts ground and pounding him, hitting him with hard elbows. They actually clash heads. I don't think that's actually what cut.
You don't think so? I was going to say that's what caused it, but
no, because they showed the headbutt and then it didn't cause him. And then a little bit later, he elbows him and it opens it up. He's at one point he's standing over him and he's like landing big shots down while Castillo's still up. And then the round ends. They go to the corner. It doesn't look like a bad cut at all. And then the referee stops it, stops the fight. I don't think the referee was stopping the fight for the cut. I think Gil wanted out.
You think so?
He was squinting. He was talking
because we do have a corner stoppage on this card, but
yeah, he was talking about I think he was saying he couldn't see this and that, and I think we had a little bit of Diego thing going on where he thought maybe it was an illegal headbutt. He's complaining about headbutt. He just got his ass kicked. He knows he's not going to win this fight. And he's like, man, maybe I can get no contest, DQ or something.
That's a very triggering thing you just said. So
I know. It's not usually I'm not the one to say these things, but
it's very triggering.
I mean, it wasn't a bad cut. He was kind of, I don't know. But third win for. Third successful title defense for Matt Hughes. We're in the middle of the Matt Hughes
he is cementing himself as a mainstay and someone that you're not going to get past easily here, and is going to be in the minds of everybody at the helm of this division for quite some time.
Yeah, and he calls out Sean Sherk. That's the guy he wants to fight next.
Don't believe that is who he fights next, though.
He does fight Sean Sherk. Let me see if that's the next one. Yeah, because it was Sean Sherk, then I think it was Frank Trigg, right? Yep, Sean Sherk, Frank Trigg. Yeah, he gets Sean Sherk next.
He does. Okay, so he got what he wanted.
Yep. And then he gets Frank Trigg after that.
And then after that...
And I was there for the Frank Trigg one.
And these are all pretty quick. He gets Sean Shirk at 42, then he gets Trigg at 45, and then it's the BJ Penn at 46, and then he gets another one at 48, and then another one at 50. So he's going to fight a lot here.
So before we go to the Chuck Liddell fight, you want to do this prelim one that got thrown in the broadcast real quick?
I didn't watch it, so that's all you.
Okay. All right, I'll do it. It was Andre Arlovski versus Ian Freeman. Arlovski's only 23 years old at this time. He looked really light of feet, was opened up with leg kicks. Eventually, he ended up dropping Ian Freeman early in the first round with the right hand. Freeman gets up, kind of seems to get his bearings, and then just gets dropped with a big right hand right after that, and gets finished off. Really good showing from Andre Arlovski.
Were you following Arlovski at this point?
He was in the UFC. He didn't have a lot of hype yet. I think he lost to Pedro Hizzo, and I feel like he lost something else. We should have looked this up. I don't know, man. Sometimes these kind of blend together.
I couldn't remember when the Arlovski era begins. And when he started getting all the hype.
When he becomes champ, well, he really didn't have hype until really the Tim Sylvia fight.
Because he's fought the who's who. I mean, he's not always on the winning side of fighting the who's who, but the guy's fought the who's who of MMA.
Yeah, so Andre Arlovski had 2 losses in a row. He lost to Rico Rodriguez and Pedro Hizzo at this point. No, you're talking about
that's the who's who. Yeah,
you're talking about a UFC champion and a guy Pedro Hizzo who many people believe should have won a UFC title. So, yeah,
and gets a big win over Ian Freeman. I think we talked about Ian Freeman on the last card we did, I believe. It might have been the card before that. But Ian Freeman, a guy that just, I guess, never really lived up to what he seemed like he could have.
No, but he was coming off the win over Frank Mir. He's coming off a huge upset win.
Huge, yeah.
Yeah, so nice win by Andre Arlovski.
All right, so
this might open people's eyes up for Arlovski beating Ian Freeman.
This is probably the one, and then maybe he starts trending in the right direction.
Yeah, honestly, I'm a little embarrassed that I don't remember, to be honest.
Our co-main event, we have Babalu taking on Chuck Liddell, and
man,
this is another highlight reel. You got yourself a highlight reel. It's a very weird. So Chuck Liddell ends up beating Babalu with a head kick, and then follows up with some punches. This was very. You know what I was when I watched this. What I compared it to was the John Jones Cormier, the third fight there, where the kick that Jones lands is real weird. You know, it's like the second fight. Sorry, it's like most of the way up the leg, and like
shin.
It's kind of it's like a shin, and it's like a weird angle, but it's probably like getting hit with a baseball bat.
Yeah,
because it's just a meaty, bony, like a bony part.
Sure. Babalu's leading into it a little.
Yeah, and that's what it was a really weird kind of angle, and it was like high shin, just crack, and it gets the job done.
So when Tito won his last fight and Chuck won his fight, they were kind of angling for the Tito versus Chuck thing. That was like the next fight. Best friend, close friends, training partners. They're going to fight each other. They're going to put the difference aside. And both of them spoke about that. Like, it's going to probably happen. And then the whole Ken Shamrock thing came. Well, they have a chance to get Ken Shamrock. This is their dream fight. Let's do that instead. Chuck gets sent to the sidelines, but they don't. They go over the top, stressing that this is Chuck Liddell's the number one contender. He shouldn't have to take this fight. He takes it because he wants to. They sell this crap out of that between Rogan, Liddell. Everybody was saying it. That said, I think this is one of Chuck Liddell. Even though I understand where you're coming from with the knockout, it was a weird knockout. I thought it was one of his best performances because he found his right hand almost immediately. Like everyone remembers that high kick knockout, but he was piecing up Babalu like
100%.
Like he found his right hand. He had timing on his right hand right from the very start. He was landing it over and over again, and then the high kick just finished him off.
And I wasn't saying that as a negative. It was more just what it reminded me of. It was just this kind of like, it isn't your normal head kick knockout where your foot lands and whatever. This was like, he's leaning into it a bit. Again, very similar to the Cormier one, where he's leaning into it a little bit, and then he just gets hit on like a high shin, just like bone on face, kind of crack across.
And you mentioned highlight. This is one that's on Chuck Liddell's highlights.
Oh yeah.
So this definitely, if there was any argument against Chuck Liddell being the next contender for the title, it's over. Chuck Liddell's run right here has a similar feel to Tony Ferguson, where he won so many fights you can't deny him. Now, this is his 10th win in a row, his 7th win in a row in the UFC. And that's not mentioning that during that 7-fight win streak in the UFC, he also went over the Pride and knocked out Guy Mezger, like unconscious with a shot. So, there's no denying Chuck Liddell's the guy. And remember, when I say he's on a 7-fight winning streak, you have to put it back in those times. We got Gil Castillo getting his second title shot on a 1-fight winning streak. So, Pat Miletich is fighting guys on title shots on losing streaks. So, Chuck Liddell did more than enough to deserve it. Before we get to the main event, you want to fill the last. We got another prelim fight that got thrown in the card.
Give it to me.
There was 2 other prelim fights. Vladimir Mashenko beat up Travis View, got a first-round TKO. I'm surprised they didn't give us that one. But we get the battle of the 2 undefeateds. We have Philip Miller, 14-0 versus 17-0 Mark Weir. The best part of this, the first minute, there's no commentary. And then like a minute in, the broadcast starts working.
They're like, oh, whoops.
Really fun fight, back and forth fight. I just want to give a little play-by-play. Weir opens up immediately with a big combination, but Miller takes him down. Weir throws up a triangle choke. Now, remember, Weir's last fight, he had at that time, the quickest knockout in UFC history. So there's some buzz on Mark Weir, and I was one of them. I was big on Mark Weir. And, he's going against Philip Miller, another guy. So anyway, Miller fights off the triangle choke, picks him up, slams him, starts hitting some ground and pound. He gets a triangle choke a second time. He almost had 2 triangles close. Miller gets out, ground and pound. Weir scrambles up to his feet, gets taken down, more ground and pound. 1 round for him. Second round, the action starts, and Weir opens the action immediately with a high kick that almost knocks out Philip Miller. He drops him. He's ground and pounding him. He ended up taking his back. Miller survives, reverses it, lands some ground and pound, but then he gets reversed by Weir, and there's like brutal ground and pound by Mark Weir. He is teeing off. It looks like the fight might get stopped. Weir eventually just lets him up to beat him up on the feet. Front kicks him square right in the face in a beautiful one. And then suddenly with 20 seconds left, it looks like Weir might knock him out. Miller might not make it to the 3rd round. Miller gets a takedown, mounts him. Weir gives up his back and gets choked out.
So crazy.
It's like he's about to lose, and then like a 15-second span.
I'll have to go back and watch that one.
It's a fun fight. But anyways, why it's even more significant is Philip Miller fights one more time after this outside the UFC. He gets a win, and then he retires. He goes on to become a police officer, LAPD, and we never see him fight again. And he retired with a perfect 16-0 record. And again, he's kind of forgotten now, but back in, I'd say from 2002 to 2008-ish, give or take, he was brought up a lot. And it's weird for a guy that if you watch him, like, yeah, he has a good talent, but not Anderson Silva, not, George St. Pierre, guys like this. But he had this like folklore to him that he left retired undefeated, and people were like, well, who would win? Anderson Silva or Philip Miller, and he started becoming like a punchline kind of thing,
like a boogeyman,
Yeah, like he retired. No one could beat Philip Miller. We moved on, So yeah, Philip Miller is undefeated, 16-0.
Another thing with Chuck Liddell, and this again, probably not a very popular thing to say, but it's something that we've talked about a lot with these, because this is UFC 40. We've only had, there's been more than 39 events for the UFC, but you know what I mean. We're not even at 50 events in the UFC, and Pride is around, but we're not very far into it. Obviously, you have the stuff that even predates UFC, and there's a couple other just like tertiary whatever promotions that are existing right now too. But MMA as a sport is still very young, and the talent levels of people then, for the most part, doesn't translate into now. As much as we would love it to, as much as we'd love to have those conversations, when you watch a lot of these older fights, you're reminded of, boy, this guy would just get his ass kicked in current whatever.
Oh yeah.
Now
Philip Miller would not make it to the
well, and I'm actually talking about Chuck Liddell.
Oh, Chuck Liddell, yeah.
So the thing with Chuck Liddell that I was noticing watching this is I was like, and again, I didn't grow up watching the sport. Chuck Liddell is definitely someone that when I was watching the UFC was someone I was interested in, but I wasn't paying attention to him on on this kind of a level. I didn't give a shit.
Analyzing his game.
No, I wasn't. I just liked the Iceman, like I liked the Mohawk and I was just into that.
Yeah. The blue flame thing.
Yeah, I was just the Just Bleed guy, back in probably 2007 and 6 and, So, and that was obviously he was coming down, but I was still into Liddell. But after watching this fight, the one thing that I kept thinking of was like, he is so sloppy. It's crazy.
That's always been his
and it's like
unorthodox style, yeah.
And I just never realized it, and I noticed it obviously now that we're now a couple fights into Liddell on this podcast. Yeah. I just never really realized he's sloppy as hell, man. Like imagine him in there now with these top guys at light heavyweight.
Yeah.
I mean, they would just murder him. It's crazy.
I think Chuck Liddell, and I think Chuck Liddell could make it to the UFC now. I think he could be successful, but not being a top 10 talent, not being a champion for sure. But I feel the same way about Matt Hughes. Matt Hughes would have really struggled to get into the UFC, being a one-dimensional wrestler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get into our main event.
TRT would struggle.
There it is.
But anyways.
Let's get into our main event. We have Tito Ortiz taking on Ken Shamrock for the light heavyweight championship of the world. Okay. Before we talk about the fight itself, we got 8 minutes, all right? Okay. We can spend all 8 minutes talking about this. Well, we got to spend 6 minutes on it and then 2 minutes grading the card. Sure. So we got about 6 minutes to just talk about this fight, all right? Set the stage a little bit. We did it at the beginning of the podcast, but give me another, set the stage.
Oh, dude, I was so excited. I was getting goosebumps. So we start with the entrances. Both entrances were flawless. The first, Ken Shamrock's entrance, he's standing there, he comes up, they bring him up from, they have the what do they call it? The entrance ramp.
Give me 1 second.
They bring him up from the ground. He's got both hands up like this by himself, and then his team joins him. It was crazy. And then Tito, same thing, but Tito, they got these fire going off, and he stops halfway through down and just kind of looks around. And I was like,
it's all WWE. I love it.
Oh, dude, but I was so into it.
I love it.
I was 20 years old. I was so into it.
Can I real quick?
Oh, don't forget, Limp Bizkit was playing for Tito. Perfect.
Yeah. Of course he is. Who else would be playing for Tito?
Yeah.
So, real quick, we didn't talk about this. At the very beginning of the card was Tiki. Did you catch his entrance? Go back and rewatch it. It's really bizarre. He's confused. He's trying to go in the wrong door.
I remember he flipped his shirt in the end. It got caught in the cameraman.
Yeah, it's a whole, yes. It's his whole entrance is all messed up. It's he wasn't prepared to be there. But anyway, continue. So sorry.
Yeah, he wasn't prepared. He definitely wasn't prepared.
No, he was not.
But yeah, the build up, the intensity in the arena, you could feel it. It was exciting. Do you want to do some quick play by play? I'm trying to do it real quick because it's not the exciting stuff, but
we can. I want to talk about something that's kind of an overarching thing a little bit.
Okay.
So I'd never seen this fight before. Today was my first time ever watching this fight. I don't know if I've even seen highlights, to be honest with you. It's my first time watching the fight. I know I've seen the second one, but I don't remember it, which means I've seen highlights.
And I don't know why anybody saw the third one, why that happened.
Right, why it even happened in the first place. So I went into this going, okay, as soon as Ken Shamrock rocks out, and I'm like, oh, he's 93 years old. Tito Ortiz is at the top of his game. Ken Shamrock hasn't been in the UFC in a while. He's still been fighting, of course, but hasn't been in the UFC in a long time, since Ultimate 96. Hasn't been in the octagon UFC-wise, long time. Tito Ortiz, complete top of his game at this point. Ken Shamrock looks like he's aged horribly. Like, holy cow, Tito Ortiz is just going to walk through Ken Shamrock. Now, to a certain extent, that isn't wrong, but overarching thing, Ken Shamrock landed a couple shots on Tito that really surprised me. Well, he outright rocks him at one point.
And I'll go to the place on this. Yeah. So let's just. I'm going to give a play-by-play in the first round because that's really the only moment that Ken is even competitive.
I was just surprised he even lasted as long as he did, let alone to even land a punch that rocked him. I was just surprised. Yeah.
So I'll get to that too. So Tito. So it starts off. Tito starts teeing off on Ken right away. Grabs the clinch. He's kneeing him, elbowing him, beating the crap out of him. He's trying to finish him off with punches, and then Ken catches Tito with the right hand. That Tito drops to his knee, and then gets up and jumps back up, takes him, slams him down,
continues the onslaught,
slams him down and ground and pounds him. Easy round for Tito. I've always believed that right hand by Ken Shamrock has been over. He caught him, he dropped him to a knee.
It's the Michael Johnson. It's the Michael Johnson Khabib shot. Khabib shot.
I do. Not to that extent, but I never thought he was that hurt. I think he was just more surprised, maybe a little stunned, but he wasn't seriously hurt. Just to finish up the play-by-play, second round, Tito starts. Ken is absolutely gassed. Kenny into the second round. Tito starts picking him apart, takes him down, ground and pounds him, moves to side control, ground and pounds him more. At the very end of the round, Ken gets an escape to his feet and just gets beat up on the feet more. Third round starts. Tito goes right to the clinch. Landing combinations. Huge hard slam. Brutal ground and pound. Ken gets back to his feet at the very end. Crushing body kick by Tito. And then some clinch striking and knees. It finishes the third round, and then the towel comes in. That said, man, I thought the towel came in way too late. I thought the towel should have came in between the second and third round. Ken was from after the first 30 seconds into the next of the 15 minutes, Ken Shamrock is getting beat to a pulp by Tito Ortiz. And it is one side as it comes. It's hard watching this 93-year-old man get teed off.
It is, man. I'm just surprised he lasted as long as he did. And then it wasn't even a stoppage. It was his corner had to throw in the towel. I was just surprised. I didn't realize that Ken Shamrock was that level of tough. I mean, that is for being that old, for having been around for so long in the sport, to be able to be that tough and resilient at this stage in your career is pretty phenomenal.
He was tough.
I mean,
he didn't quit.
For real, legit kudos to. I know it's weird to give kudos to people for allowing their face to be used as a punching bag, but it's kudos to have that level of to there.
Kudos for getting to this big rivalry with Tito and being the big boss. You're the big brother who's going to protect your team and then get absolutely destroyed by him.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. It was really.
Imagine given the rivalry there and given not just between Ken and Tito, but the teams. Imagine having to throw in the towel. I'm sure that was a devastating thing for them to have to do.
This is not just a guy in the team. This is the leader. This is the face. This is the guy who started the team. Yeah, it must have been tough. So afterwards, they asked Tito, specifically Chuck Liddell, "You got to fight your friend." And now go back to Chuck Liddell. Chuck Liddell saying, "I want the winner of Tito versus Ken. I'll knock both of them out." Chuck has already distanced himself. He's not doing the "we're friends" anymore. And Ken is Tito goes the opposite direction. He's talking about money, and he's talking about, I'm not willing to fit my friend unless I get paid more. He is backtracking from Tito. From Chuck. Tito, this is the era. Now is the real time that Tito is accused of running from Chuck, and here it is.
Well, and as we will see here very shortly, Chuck Liddell does fight for the title next, or fight for a title next, and it's not against Tito.
Three from now.
Yeah, it's a few from now. Yeah. All right.
Before we get let's do the trending up, trending down. One guy who trended up, one guy who trended down.
Yes. All right, trending up.
To me, it's Tito. You beat up Ken, and Tito was already the face of the UFC. He just needed that big name, and this was his moment. Now, in my opinion, Tito makes huge mistakes after this. But at this night, just talking up to that night, to me, Tito's stock was through the roof.
So the only reason why I don't want to say Tito is because so you were watching the sport then. So maybe this fight wasn't as much of a foregone conclusion.
No, it wasn't.
So
there was a lot of people who thought Ken was going to win.
So from that perspective, Tito Ortiz all day. From a perspective of I wasn't watching the sport then, I would go Matt Hughes just because I feel like he's really cementing now. I'm the captain. I'm the guy. Who on earth is going to be able to stop me?
Yeah.
And it's not going to be you, and it's not going to be you. Like, he's really cementing himself as that. And, again, we have, hindsight's 20/20, but that's how it feels at the time. So, Tito Ortiz, obviously, or Matt Hughes.
Yeah, so to me, trending down, the guy whose stock fell the most, I'm going to go Ian Freeman. I mean, you figure the last fight before he pulled that huge upset in his home country. Remember when it was in England, in his home country against Frank Mir, and then the next time he fights, he gets brutally knocked out by Angelowski. Going the wrong direction.
I will go. I think. Okay, let me look real quick. Let me see if I can support my answer. I am going to go. Yes, that's not a good answer.
BJ Penn's commentary?
Yeah, right. I was going to go Babalu, but he's not coming off of a great stretch. So, see, I didn't watch the prelims because Ian Freeman would be my answer just simply because he was riding a wave and then he hits a brick wall.
Another good one would have been Mark Weir, because Mark Weir he was coming off that quick knockout, had a lot of hype. He was doing well in the fight, and then suddenly gets taken out and submitted.
Which are both prelims. Nobody on the main card really, because everything just seems like such a foregone conclusion to me.
But maybe TK, it was a cut.
I guess the turning down's a tough one.
Right,
I think you're right. It's prelims.
How about the Lions then?
Just as a whole. All right, we'll go with that. We'll go with that then. All right, let's grade the card.
I've given it an A, man. Between the anticipation, the fights, you had crazy knockouts, you had funny moments like BJ Penn's commentary, the Tiki's line.
The fun Tank Abbott interview.
You got highlights with Robbie Lawler, highlights with Chuck Liddell,
Carlos
highlights
Newton.
with
Carlos Newton.
Carlos Newton, Matt Hughes, all got stoppages. And then you had the debut of the Roman soldier intro and Face the Pain. So yeah, I give it an A. And to me, this is one. If you're an MMA fan, you want to hit. You don't have to watch every these ones, but this is one you should watch.
Yeah, A, 100%. I'm not really going to give anything an A plus. So I think an A is about as high as I'm ever going to go, and this was an A.
All right, UFC 241.
Well, it's like what the hell else could you? What else do you want? It's like what is the quote? Like, are you not entertained? Like, what else could you possibly want out of a card?
There wasn't a dull moment in this.
No, everything
honestly,
was a finish.
The most dull might have been Hughes Castillo, and that ended in the first round.
And a doctor stoppage. Yeah, so it's like, that was probably the worst quote unquote fight. All right, look ahead. So next up, we have UFC 41 Onslaught. You have a title fight on this card. That is the headliner.
Two title fights.
Between Rico Rodriguez, Tim Sylvia. You also have another title fight between Cal Luno and BJ Penn.
Yeah.
Then you have Frank Mir taking on Tank Abbott. We already talked about Tank Abbott making his comeback. This is also a very infamous fight with a very infamous finish. So I have seen this just because it is what it is.
Between Matt Lindland and Phil Baroni.
Ooh, I've never seen this fight before, so that would be fun. Yeah, and our prelims, you have two now best friends fighting, which is Dean Thomas and Matt Serra.
Yeah.
Also, Gan McGee sighting on the prelims. This is a good card. I am excited to watch this. As far as the name value is concerned,
Eve Edwards. Eve Edwards is another good name.
Yep, on the prelims.
Pedro Hizzo is always two former title challengers. Vladimir Manchenko, Pedro Hizzo going at it. So on this card, just like I know I like to do this all the time, but I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 future or current champ. I mean, like 5 guys who held the title. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other guys who. Oh, 6 guys. Sorry, 6. 6 guys who challenged for the title. Eve Edwards, who was like an unsung champion for a while, like kind of like the what do they call it, like unwritten or uncrowned champion. Some good talent in this one.
Yep, I'm excited to watch it. This will be a good card. Ken Shamrock serves as color commentator for this one, so that'll be interesting to hear. And again, the return of Tank Abbott, and then you have BJ Penn Caluno 2. So there you go. Anything else you want to add before we go?
No, that's it, man. It's our first show since the whole coronavirus pandemic has really stopped all in May, so it's good to get these going. So,
agreed. All right, man. We will talk soon. And to the fans, we'll see you next week.